You're such a disgrace, Serena." The words hung in the air like poison, cutting through the elegant chatter of crystal glasses and designer perfume. 20 pairs of eyes turned toward me, some wide with shock, others gleaming with the cruel satisfaction of witnessing someone else's humiliation. My husband, Adrian, stood there, his face twisted with embarrassment and rage, while his wealthy friends watched our marriage crumble in real time. But how do we get here? How did the man who once promised to never let me feel small become the very person making me feel invisible? Let me take you back to where it all began, because this story isn't just about one terrible night. It's about what happens when love gets poisoned by greed, and what it takes for a woman to remember her worth. 6 hours earlier, I was standing in our bedroom, looking at myself in the mirror of our Santiago mansion. The late afternoon sun streamed through those expensive windows, casting everything in gold. From the outside, our life looked perfect: marble floors, manicured gardens, roses that cost more than some people's rent. But perfection, I learned, was just another word for prison when you're trapped inside it. I touched the pearl necklace at my throat, the only thing in this house that truly belonged to me. These pearls were my grandmother's, worn smooth by her loving hands through decades of hard work and sacrifice. She raised me in a tiny apartment above her bakery, and every morning she'd fasten these same pearls around her neck before heading downstairs to knead dough and serve coffee to construction workers and office clerks who became like family. Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family. Enjoy the story. True beauty isn't what you wear, sweetheart, she used to tell me while braiding my hair. It's how you make people feel when they're around you. I carried those words with me everywhere, even here in this mansion where everything sparkled but nothing seemed to shine. Adrian hadn't always been this way. 3 years ago, when we met at Rose's Cafe, where I worked part-time, he was different. Charming, yes, but also kind. He'd order black coffee and sit for hours, asking about my dreams, listening like my words mattered. He talked about building something together, about how my gentle spirit made him want to be better. When he proposed, it wasn't with some flashy display. It was during a quiet walk in the park with my grandmother's ring that she'd slipped into his hand earlier that day. But success changes people, or maybe it just reveals who they really were all along. As Adrian climbed higher in his father's company, as his name appeared in business magazines and society pages, something shifted. The man who once loved my simplicity began to see it as a flaw. The qualities that made him fall for me, my authenticity, my connection to regular people, my contentment with small joys, suddenly became sources of his shame. Tonight was supposed to be important. Adrian had invited his inner circle. The Blackstone heir who controlled half the city's real estate. The tech mogul's wife who'd never worked a day, but spoke like she'd built empires. The investment banker whose laugh sounded like breaking glass. These weren't just friends. They were Adrian's measuring stick, his mirror reflecting back the status he desperately craved. I'd chosen my soft, blue dress carefully, something elegant, but not trying too hard. Adrian's eyes narrowed when he saw me coming down the stairs. "Serena, couldn't you wear the Milan dress? The one I had tailored? Tonight's important." My hand went instinctively to my grandmother's pearls. "This necklace means more to me than any dress. It's a piece of her. I want to carry her with me tonight." He exhaled sharply, that sound he made when I disappointed him. "Fine, just try to keep up with the conversation, all right?" Those words should have been my warning. They were the first crack in what would become a complete collapse. But I nodded, smiled, and walked into that dining room, believing that love could survive anything. I had no idea that in just a few hours, I'd be standing in front of those cruel, glittering people while my husband called me a disgrace. I had no idea that my world was about to shatter completely. But sometimes, things have to break before they can be rebuilt into something stronger. What I didn't know was that someone in that room was watching everything. Someone from Adrian's past who would change the entire course of this night. Someone who saw my worth, even when my own husband had forgotten it. Will Serena find the strength to stand up for herself? Or will Adrian's cruelty break her spirit forever? And who is this mysterious figure who's about to turn their perfect dinner party upside down? The first guests arrived like sharks, smelling blood in the water. Victoria Blackstone stepped through our front door in a dress that cost more than most people's cars, her smile sharp enough to cut glass. Behind her came Marcus Chun, the tech mogul who spoke in numbers and treated humans like stock prices. Then the Ashfords, old money, so ancient they still acted like they owned people instead of just companies. I stood beside Adrian in our grand foyer, my grandmother's pearls feeling heavier with each handshake. These weren't just dinner guests. They were Adrian's judges, here to decide whether he belonged in their golden circle or deserved to be cast out. "Serena looks lovely tonight," Victoria said, her eyes scanning my dress like a detective looking for evidence. Such a quaint choice. Very authentic. The way she said authentic made it sound like a disease. Adrian's hand found my waist, but his grip felt more like a warning than affection. "She has her own style," he replied, and I caught the apologetic tone creeping into his voice. Already, he was making excuses for me. The dining room sparkled under our crystal chandelier, every fork placed with military precision. I'd spent hours arranging white roses and lighting candles, trying to create warmth in a space that felt more like a museum than a home. As we took our seats, I found myself across from Jennifer Ashford, whose grandmother had apparently invented snobbery and passed it down like a family heirloom. "Tell me, Serena," Jennifer began, cutting her salmon with surgical precision, "where did you attend university?" Her tone suggested she already knew the answer would disappoint her. "I went to state," I replied simply. "Studied early childhood education." The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus actually choked on his wine. Victoria's eyebrows climbed so high they nearly disappeared in her hairline. "How practical," Jennifer finally managed, like I just admitted to collecting garbage for fun. Adrian shifted uncomfortably beside me. "Serena's very nurturing," he offered weakly. "Great with kids." But instead of defending me, his voice carried that same apologetic tone. He was shrinking away from me, inch by invisible inch, and everyone at that table could see it happening. The conversation moved to their world, stock portfolios, yacht clubs, children attending Swiss boarding schools. I listened, nodding politely when addressed, but inside I felt like I was watching a play where everyone knew their lines except me. These people didn't just have money. They wielded it like a weapon, using wealth to cut others down to size. "Did you hear about the Williamson Charity Gala?" Victoria asked, her voice dripping with false concern. Poor Sarah showed up in a dress from last season. I felt so embarrassed for her. She glanced at my outfit meaningfully. Marcus laughed, a sound like grinding metal. At least she didn't wear her grandmother's jewelry to a five-star event. His eyes fixed on my pearls with cruel amusement. My face burned, but I kept my voice steady. "These pearls have been in my family for 3 generations. They've seen more love and genuine moments than most jewelry ever will." The table went quiet again, but this time it wasn't respectful silence. It was the kind of quiet that happens before an explosion. Adrian's face had gone pale, and I could see panic flickering behind his eyes. "That's sweet," Victoria said with poison honey in her voice. "How sentimental." But Adrian, my husband, the man who promised to protect me, didn't defend the pearls or their story. Instead, he let out a nervous laugh that made my stomach drop. He was joining them. He was choosing their approval over my dignity. "Serena has such a romantic view of things," he said, and his words felt like betrayal wrapped in silk. As the evening wore on, I watched my husband transform. The man who once held my hand while I told stories about my grandmother slowly dissolved, replaced by someone desperate to prove he belonged with these cruel, empty people. Every laugh he shared at my expense, every apologetic glance when I spoke, every moment he chose their acceptance over my feelings, it all built up like pressure in a kettle. By the time dessert arrived, I could barely breathe. The walls of our beautiful dining room felt like they were closing in. These people weren't just wealthy. They were emotional vampires, feeding off others' discomfort to feel powerful. That's when Adrian made his fatal mistake. Jennifer had just finished a particularly nasty story about some little nobody who'd married into her social circle, and the table was buzzing with cruel laughter. I'd been quiet, trying to maintain my dignity while they picked me apart piece by piece. The problem with people from certain backgrounds, Marcus said, looking directly at me, is they never quite learn how to behave in civilized company. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Everyone was looking at me, waiting to see how I'd react. This was their sport: corner someone vulnerable and watch them break. I took a breath, ready to respond with the grace my grandmother taught me, but Adrian cut me off. "You're such a disgrace, Serena." The words exploded out of him like he'd been holding them back all evening. His face was red with frustration and embarrassment, his hands clenched into fists on the white tablecloth. "I try to give you opportunities to fit in, to be part of something bigger than your small-town mentality, and you just sit there being yourself." The silence that followed was complete. Even the candle flames seemed to freeze. 20 pairs of eyes stared at us, some shocked, others gleaming with the satisfaction of watching someone else's marriage implode in real time. But what happened next would change everything, because someone else had been watching this entire cruel performance. Someone who'd been waiting for exactly this moment. And they were about to make Adrian regret every word he'd just spoken. Time stopped. That's what trauma does. It freezes everything around you while your heart tries to process the impossible. My husband, the man who'd promised to love and cherish me, had just called me a disgrace in front of the most judgmental people in the city. I could feel my grandmother's pearls against my throat, and suddenly I was 8 years old again, sitting in her kitchen while she taught me how to make bread. "When people are cruel to you, sweetheart," she'd whispered, flour dusting her gentle hands, "it says nothing about you and everything about the emptiness inside them." The faces around the table were a mixture of shock and savage delight. Victoria's lips curved into a smile that reminded me of a snake. Marcus was practically vibrating with excitement at witnessing such drama. The Ashfords looked like they'd just been served the finest entertainment money could buy. But what hurt most wasn't their reactions. It was the look on Adrian's face. Relief. He looked relieved, like he'd finally said what he'd been thinking for months. Like calling me a disgrace in front of these monsters was somehow freeing for him. I stood up slowly, my chair making the softest scraping sound against our marble floor. Every eye in the room followed me, hungry for more drama, more pain to feast on. But I wouldn't give them that satisfaction. "Excuse me," I said quietly, my voice steady despite the earthquake happening in my chest. I walked toward the French doors leading to our garden, each step measured and deliberate. Behind me, I could hear the whispers starting, like vultures gathering over fresh roadkill. "Well, that was awkward," someone murmured. "Poor Adrian." Victoria's voice carried clearly. "Imagine being stuck with someone so unsuitable." The night air hit my face like a blessing. Our garden, lit by soft pathway lights, felt like sanctuary after the suffocating cruelty inside. I walked to my favorite bench, the one hidden behind the rose bushes where I came to think when the mansion felt too much like a prison. My hands were shaking now that no one could see them. 3 years of marriage, and it had come to this. The man who once kissed away my tears had just caused the deepest ones I'd ever cried. I remembered our first real kiss, right here in this garden, actually. It was during our engagement party, and Adrian had pulled me away from the crowd because he said he needed a moment just with me. "You're the best thing that ever happened to me," he'd whispered against my lips. "I'll never let anyone make you feel less than amazing." The irony was so sharp it could have cut glass. Pretty rough in there. I turned around, startled. A man was standing at the edge of the pathway, hands in his pockets, looking genuinely concerned rather than entertained by my misery. He was tall, with kind eyes and an easy smile that seemed completely out of place after the vicious performance I'd just escaped. "I'm sorry," I said, quickly wiping at my eyes. "I didn't realize anyone else was out here." "Don't apologize. If anyone should be sorry, it's the people in that house." He stepped closer, and I could see him more clearly now. There was something familiar about his face, but I couldn't place it. "I'm Ethan," he said simply. "Ethan Brooks." The name hit me like lightning. Ethan Brooks, Adrian's college roommate, his biggest rival in business school, The one person who could make Adrian lose his cool just by walking into a room. What was he doing here? You probably don't remember me, he continued, misreading my expression. Adrian and I have history. Oh, I remembered him all right. Adrian had spent countless dinners over the years ranting about Ethan Brooks, how he was too idealistic, too soft, how he'd never make it in the real world because he actually cared about his employees. According to Adrian, Ethan was everything wrong with modern business. But looking at him now, standing in my garden with genuine concern in his eyes while my husband called me names inside, I wondered if Adrian had gotten it backwards. What are you doing here? I asked, not accusingly, just curious. I was invited, he said with a wry smile. Surprised me too. Adrian called last week, said he wanted to bury the hatchet and discuss some business opportunity. His expression darkened slightly, though after watching what just happened in there, I'm starting to think he had other motives. I looked at him more carefully. Ethan had changed since college, filled out, grown more confident, but there was still something gentle about him that money couldn't buy or fake. Those are beautiful, he said, nodding toward my necklace. My hand went automatically to the pearls. They were my grandmother's. Tell me about her. The simple request almost broke me. When was the last time Adrian had asked about my grandmother? When was the last time anyone had wanted to hear about the woman who shaped my entire worldview? She raised me. I began slowly. She owned a little bakery, worked 16-hour days, but never once complained. She taught me that kindness was the only currency that mattered, and that real elegance comes from how you treat people, not what you wear while doing it. Ethan nodded, like he actually understood. She sounds like she was an amazing woman. She was. I touched the pearls again. She used to say that these pearls were witnesses. They'd seen her through her wedding, the birth of her children, my mother's funeral, raising me. Every important moment of her life, they were there. And now, they're witnessing your important moments too. Something about the way he said it made me look at him sharply. There was no pity in his expression, no condescension. Just respect. When was the last time someone had looked at me like that? That's when the French doors burst open behind us. Adrian stormed out, his face twisted with rage and something else, embarrassment. He'd clearly been drinking more wine, and his expensive suit was slightly disheveled. "Serena," he called harshly, "what the hell do you think you're doing out here?" But when he saw Ethan, everything changed. His face went from angry to shocked to something that looked almost like fear. "Brooks," he said, his voice dropping to barely controlled fury. I should have known. Ethan straightened, but didn't move toward Adrian. "Hello, Adrian. Lovely party."
Don't. Adrian's voice was dangerous now. Don't you dare stand there and pretend like you weren't just swooping in like some white knight, trying to steal my wife. The accusation was so ridiculous, so completely off base that I almost laughed. Almost. But then I saw the look in Adrian's eyes, and I realized something terrifying. He wasn't just drunk and angry. He was scared. Scared of Ethan. Scared of what he represented. Scared of losing control of the narrative he'd been building about our marriage. And scared men, I'd learned, were the most dangerous kind. "We were just talking," I said quietly, try to defuse the situation. But Adrian wasn't listening to me anymore. His attention was fixed entirely on Ethan, like they were two animals circling each other before a fight. "You always were a manipulative bastard," Adrian snarled. "Show up uninvited, play the concerned friend, wait for the perfect moment to make your move." "Actually," Ethan said calmly, "you invited me. Remember? Said you had a business proposal that might interest me." Adrian's face went pale. Whatever his plan had been, it clearly wasn't working out the way he'd expected. But what none of us knew was that someone inside the house had been recording everything. And what they'd captured was about to turn this private confrontation into very public humiliation. The real question was, who was recording and what did they plan to do with the footage? "You're lying," Adrian spat, but his voice cracked like a teenager's. Ethan pulled out his phone with casual precision, the screen glowing in the garden soft light. "Tuesday, March 15th, 2:30 p.m. You call my office directly." He scrolled through something, then looked up with that maddeningly calm expression. "Your exact words were, 'I've got an opportunity that could make us both very rich. Dinner at my place Friday night. Time to put old grudges aside.' I watched my husband's face cycle through emotions like a broken traffic light. Confusion, anger, fear, then back to anger. The wine was making him sloppy, revealing cracks in whatever game he'd been playing. That doesn't mean you can just. Adrian gestured wildly at the space between Ethan and me, like we'd been doing something scandalous instead of having the first genuine conversation I'd had in months. Can't what? Talk to your wife like she's an actual human being? Ethan's voice stayed level, but there was steel underneath the silk. Because from where I was sitting in there, watching you call her a disgrace in front of those vultures, I'd say someone needs to remember that Serena is a person, not a prop in your social climbing act. The words hit Adrian like physical blows. His face went from pale to red to something approaching purple. But what scared me wasn't his anger. It was the way he kept glancing back at the house, like he was worried about what his precious friend were thinking. "Don't you dare lecture me about my marriage," Adrian said, stepping closer to Ethan. "You don't know anything about what we've built together." Built? I found my voice finally, and it came out stronger than I expected. "What exactly have we built, Adrian? Because from where I'm standing, it feels more like you've been tearing things down." Both men turned to look at me, but their expressions couldn't have been more different. Adrian looked annoyed, like I was interrupting some important male ritual. Ethan looked proud, like he'd been waiting for me to find my voice. "Serena, please," Adrian said in that patronizing tone that made my skin crawl. "The adults are talking." The silence that followed was deafening. Even the night sounds seemed to stop. No crickets, no wind in the trees, nothing. Just the sound of a marriage finally showing its true colors. Ethan took a step forward, and for the first time tonight, his calm facade cracked. "Did you just tell your wife that the adults are talking? Like she's a child who should be seen and not heard." "She's my wife," Adrian said, like that explained everything. Like those two words gave him ownership over my thoughts, my feelings, my right to participate in conversations about my own life. "No," Ethan said quietly. "She's her own person. She's Serena. She has a name, a mind, a heart that you just broke into pieces in front of a room full of strangers. She's not your property, Adrian. She never was." I stared at Ethan, feeling something crack open in my chest. When was the last time someone had defended me like that? When was the last time anyone had seen me as more than just Adrian's wife, the small-town girl who got lucky? "You don't know what you're talking about," Adrian said, but his voice was losing its conviction. "We're happy. We're successful. We have everything." "Do you?" Ethan asked, because what I saw in there was a man so desperate for approval from people who don't even like him that he was willing to humiliate the one person who actually loved him. Adrian flinched like he'd been slapped. "Those people are my friends. They're important. They matter. More than she does." The question hung in the air like smoke. Adrian opened his mouth, then closed it, then opened it again. But no words came out. His silence was an answer all by itself. I felt something inside me finally break free, like a bird that had been caged so long it forgot it could fly. "I'm standing right here," I said, my voice getting stronger with each word. "I'm right here, and you're talking about me like I'm not. Just like you did in there when you let them mock my dress, my education, my family. Just like you always do when it matters." "Serena, that's not Dash. It is," I interrupted, and the power in my own voice surprised me. "It's exactly what you do." The garden had become a battlefield, and the casualties were starting to pile up. Victoria stood frozen with her phone still raised, her face cycling through emotions like a broken slot machine. Marcus Chun was frantically typing on his own device, probably Googling Brooks Industries to see if Ethan was telling the truth. The Ashfords looked like they'd just watched their yacht sink in calm waters. But Adrian, my husband, he looked like a man watching his entire world collapse in slow motion. "This is impossible," he whispered, staring at Ethan like he was some kind of ghost. "You are nobody. You care about employees and fair wages and all that bleeding heart nonsense. You were supposed to fail." Ethan's smile was sharp enough to cut diamonds. "Funny how treating people well actually builds loyalty. Loyal employees work harder, stay longer, recommend your company to others. Revolutionary concept, I know. I watched this exchange, feeling like I was seeing my husband clearly for the first time in years. Adrian hadn't just changed. He'd revealed who he really was underneath all the charm and promises. A man who believed kindness was weakness, who thought success meant stepping on others to climb higher. The Brooks Industries acquisition was announced this morning. Ethan continued, pulling up something on his phone. Funny thing about business news, it travels fast in certain circles. He looked directly at Victoria. I'm surprised your research team didn't catch it before you decided to play games with people's lives. Victoria's hand was shaking now. Not much, but enough that we could all see it. You're bluffing. Am I? Ethan scrolled through his phone with casual precision. Let's see. Blackstone Holdings, lease renewal coming up in 6 months. Shin Tech, that new expansion you've been planning. The Ashford Foundation's charity gala venue. He looked up with mock concern. A lot of moving pieces in your lives that suddenly depend on my goodwill. The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus was the first to crack. Look, maybe we all got a little carried away tonight. No harm done, right? Just friends having dinner, little misunderstanding. Friends, I found my voice again, and it came out stronger than I expected. Is that what friends do? Mock someone's family heirlooms? Record private conversations? Stand by while someone gets humiliated for entertainment? Marcus actually flinched. Good. But Victoria wasn't giving up yet. You think you can just waltz in here and threaten us? We have lawyers. We have connections. We have Dash. Leases, Ethan finished calmly. You have leases, which I now control. He put his phone away and looked around the garden like he was seeing it for the first time. Beautiful property, by the way, though I imagine it's going to feel pretty empty once word gets around about how you treat people. Adrian stepped forward, his face flushed with desperation and rage. You planned this. You knew exactly what you were doing when you came here tonight. Actually, Ethan said, his voice getting colder, I came here hoping you'd changed. That maybe success had made you better instead of worse. I was prepared to discuss legitimate business opportunities with someone I used to respect. His eyes moved to where I stood, then back to Adrian. But watching you call your wife a disgrace because she wasn't performing wealth convincingly enough for your new friends, that changed my plans considerably. The words hit Adrian like physical blows. I could see him struggling to process what was happening, how quickly the power in this situation had shifted. Serena, he said suddenly, turning to me with desperation in his eyes. This is crazy. We can work this out. We can go inside, talk privately, fix this. But I was looking at him like I was seeing him for the first time. Really seeing him. Fix what? I asked quietly. The part where you called me a disgrace? The part where you let them mock my grandmother's pearls? The part where you've spent 3 years slowly convincing me that I'm not good enough for your world? That's not. He stopped, his mouth opening and closing like he was trying to find words that didn't exist. It is, I said simply. It's exactly what happened. And the worst part is, I let it happen. I let you make me believe that their approval was more important than my own dignity. Victoria was still holding her phone, but now it looked more like a shield than a weapon. This is ridiculous. You're all being ridiculous. So what if Adrian was a little harsh? Marriage is complicated. People say things they don't mean when they're stressed. I turned to look at her, this woman who'd spent the evening systematically trying to tear me down for sport. You know what? You're right. People do say things they don't mean. I paused, letting the words sink in. But they also say things they absolutely do mean, and they've just been too cowardly to admit it before. The garden fell silent except for the sound of wind through the roses. Everyone was staring at me, waiting to see what I'd do next. And suddenly I knew. I walked over to Adrian, my husband of 3 years, the man who'd promised to protect me from ever feeling small. He looked at me with something between hope and terror. I forgive you, I said quietly. His face flooded with relief. Serena, thank God I dash. But I won't forget, I continued, and the relief died in his eyes. And I won't pretend this didn't happen. You show me who you really are tonight, Adrian. All of you did. I looked around at the faces surrounding us. And now you get to live with the consequences. I started walking toward the garden gate again, but this time I wasn't running away. I was walking towards something better. Serena, wait. Adrian called out, panic creeping into his voice. I turned back one last time. Remember what you said to me when you proposed? You promised I'd never feel small again. But the only person who's been making me feel small for the past 3 years is you. Behind me, I heard Adrian's voice crack. Please, don't do this. Don't leave. I'll change. I'll be better. I promise. But as I reached for the gate, I heard something that stopped me cold. The sound of someone getting down on their knees. I turned around to see Adrian, my proud, successful husband, kneeling in the dirt of our garden in his expensive suit, tears streaming down his face. I'm begging you, he whispered. Please don't leave me. I can't lose you. I can't lose the only real thing in my life. The silence that followed was absolute. Even Victoria had lowered her phone. But what happened next would change everything, because someone else was about to make a choice that would shatter the last illusion any of us had about this night. Time fractured into slow motion as I stared at my husband on his knees in the dirt. Adrian Santiago, the man who controlled million-dollar deals and commanded boardrooms, was sobbing in our rose garden like a broken child. His expensive suit was getting stained, his perfect hair falling into his eyes, his hands pressed together in desperate prayer. Please, he whispered again, his voice cracking like glass. Please, Serena. I know I messed up. I know I hurt you. But I love you. I've always loved you. I got lost somewhere along the way. The assembled crowd of his precious friends stood frozen, watching their golden boy fall apart in real time. Victoria's phone was still recording, but now she looked uncomfortable, like she'd gotten more than she bargained for. Even Marcus Chun had stopped typing and was just staring. But Ethan was watching me, not Adrian. His eyes were steady, patient, like he was waiting to see what I was truly made of. Get up, I said quietly. Adrian looked up at me with desperate hope flooding his features. Does that mean dash? Get up because you're embarrassing yourself? I continued, my voice gentle but firm. Not because I'm taking you back. The hope died in his eyes like a candle being snuffed out. I walked closer to where he knelt, close enough that only he could hear my next words. Do you remember our first real fight? It was about 6 months after we got married. You came home late for some business dinner, and I was upset because you'd promised to help me plant my grandmother's rose bush that day. Adrian nodded, confusion flickering across his tear-streaked face. You said something to me that night that I never forgot. You said, Serena, I promise you'll always come first. Before business, before money, before anyone else's opinion of us. You're my priority, and you always will be. I paused, letting the memories settle between us. When did that stop being true? Adrian's mouth moved, but no sound came out. When did their approval become more important than my happiness? I continued. When did impressing strangers matter more than protecting your wife? When did you decide that love was something to be ashamed of instead of something to be proud of? I don't know, he whispered, and for the first time all night, I heard honesty in his voice. Raw, painful honesty. I don't know when it changed. I wanted to be successful. I wanted to matter. And somewhere along the way, I started thinking that meant I had to be someone else. I knelt down in front of him, ignoring the shocked gasps from his audience. When I spoke, my voice was soft enough that only he could hear. The man I married was already someone who mattered. He mattered to me. He mattered to the people who worked for him because he treated them with respect. He mattered to his community because he gave back. I touched his face gently. But you threw all of that away, chasing the approval of people who don't even like you. Adrian closed his eyes, and fresh tears leaked out. I know. God, Serena, I know. I can see it now, what I've become, what I've done to us. He opened his eyes and looked at me with something that might have been the real him, buried under years of ambition and insecurity. Can you forgive me? Can we find our way back? The question hung in the air between us like smoke. I stood up slowly, looking down at this man who'd once been my whole world. Around us, the garden was silent except for the whisper of wind through leaves. Even Victoria had stopped recording, caught up in the raw intimacy of the moment. Already told you, I said softly. I forgive you. I forgive the man I married, who got lost trying to become someone he thought he should be. I paused, gathering strength for what came next. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. And it doesn't mean pretending this didn't happen. Adrian's face crumpled. So that's it? 3 years of marriage, and you're just going to walk away? I'm not walking away from our marriage, I said carefully. I'm walking away from who we became. From this version of us where you're ashamed of me, and I'm afraid to be myself. I looked around at the faces watching us. Victoria with her cruel entertainment. Marcus with his calculating indifference. The Ashfords with their inherited arrogance. These people who'd spent the evening treating me like I was beneath their notice. You want to know what's really pathetic? I said, loud enough for all of them to hear. It's not that Adrian called me a disgrace. It's that he did it trying to impress people who were already planning to tear him apart for their own entertainment. Victoria shifted uncomfortably, but I wasn't done. You think this is funny? I asked her directly. Recording someone's marriage falling apart for social media likes? What kind of person does that make you? I was just Ash, she started, but I cut her off. You were just showing everyone exactly who you really are. I finished. All of you were. And now you get to live with that.
I turned the phone face down without reading the rest. He'll keep trying, Ethan said gently. I know. I touched my pearls again, drawing strength from their familiar weight. But I also know something he's forgotten. Love isn't supposed to require you to make yourself smaller. It's supposed to help you become more yourself, not less. Your grandmother sounds like she was a wise woman. She was. I smiled, remembering her flour-dusted hands and patient eyes. She used to say that the right person will love you not despite your imperfections, but because of them, because they're part of what makes you uniquely you. And Adrian? I sighed. Adrian loved the idea of me, the sweet, grateful wife who would make him look good and never cause problems. But the real me, the one with opinions and feelings and a backbone, that version was too complicated for his perfect life. My phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't Adrian. It was Victoria, and she'd sent a video. Don't, Ethan said, seeing my face. Whatever it is, don't look at it tonight. But I was already opening the message. The video was short, grainy from the garden lighting, but clear enough. It showed Adrian on his knees, crying, begging me not to leave. But what made my stomach turn wasn't the image. It was Victoria's caption. When keeping up appearances goes wrong. Hashtag marriage drama, hashtag social climbing, hashtag karma. She'd posted it. She'd actually posted our private moment for the world to see. I showed Ethan the screen, and his jaw tightened. I can have this taken down within the hour. Can you? I looked at him with new curiosity. Just how powerful are you now, Ethan Brooks? He smiled, but it wasn't entirely pleasant. Powerful enough to make Victoria Blackstone very, very sorry she decided to mess with people I care about. The words hung in the air between us, loaded with implications neither of us was quite ready to address. People you care about? I repeated softly. Ethan's eyes met mine across the table. Serena, I need you to know something. What happened tonight, me being there, having the power to help, that wasn't coincidence. My heart started beating faster. What do you mean? I've been keeping tabs on you for years. Not in a creepy way, he added quickly, seeing my expression. But through mutual friends, business connections, social media. I watched Adrian change, watched him start treating you like an accessory instead of partner, and it killed me. I stared at him, processing this revelation. Why didn't you say anything? Because you were married. Because I hoped he'd remember what he had before it was too late. Because interfering in someone else's marriage isn't something you do lightly. He paused. But tonight, watching him call you a disgrace in front of those vultures, I couldn't stay silent anymore. The confession settled between us like a bridge waiting to be crossed. So what happens now?
The memory made me smile despite everything. Adrian saw the smile and misunderstood it completely. His face fell, and I realized he thought I was already lost to him forever. Adrian, I said gently, whatever happens next, I need you to know that I don't regret our marriage. Not the whole thing. You taught me what I was capable of loving, even if you also taught me what I couldn't live with. That's something, I suppose. We walked out of the courthouse together, and at the steps, we stopped. This was where we'd say goodbye to 3 years of marriage, to the dreams we'd built and the promises we'd broken. Take care of yourself, I said. You too. He hesitated, then leaned down and kissed my cheek softly. Be happy. Serena. Whatever that looks like, whoever that's with, just be happy. I watched him walk away, this man who'd loved me imperfectly but genuinely, who'd hurt me deeply but was trying to heal the damage. Part of me would always love him. The version of him that had existed in stolen moments of tenderness, in quiet conversations before sleep, in the dreams we'd shared before ambition poisoned them. But I was done living in the past. I pulled out my phone and scrolled to Ethan's number. He answered on the first ring. "How did it go?" he asked. "It's official. I'm a free woman. How do you feel?" I considered the question, taking inventory of my heart and mind and soul. Sad, relieved, scared, hopeful. I paused. Ready. Ready for what? Ready to find out what comes next. There was silence on the other end of the line, and I could practically hear him choosing his words carefully. "I'm making dinner tonight," he said finally. "Real dinner, not takeout. Would you like to join me?" It was such a simple invitation, but it felt like the beginning of everything. I hashtag chapter 1. "You're such a disgrace, Serena." The words hung in the air like poison, cutting through the elegant chatter of crystal glasses and designer perfume. 20 pairs of eyes turned toward me, some wide with shock, others gleaming with the cruel satisfaction of witnessing someone else's humiliation. My husband, Adrian, stood there, his face twisted with embarrassment and rage, while his wealthy friends watched our marriage crumble in real time. But how do we get here? How did the man who once promised to never let me feel small become the very person making me feel invisible? Let me take you back to where it all began, because this story isn't just about one terrible night. It's about what happens when love gets poisoned by greed, and what it takes for a woman to remember her worth. 6 hours earlier, I was standing in our bedroom, looking at myself in the mirror of our Santiago mansion. The late afternoon sun streamed through those expensive windows, casting everything in gold. From the outside, our life looked perfect. Marble floors, manicured gardens, roses that cost more than some people's rent.